Steve.
Hey, mate.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. Really appreciate it. You're a guy that has an in-depth understanding of social media and how small to medium businesses can use it to their advantage, but also moving excitingly into the franchise space, which is also very cool in terms of their social media and marketing and how to actually get good return for what you're doing in that space. But that's my sum up, I guess, of you. But for the people listening on that don't know you, tell us a bit about yourself.
Thanks, Tim. Thanks for coming in today too. Fantastic to see you. Yeah, well, as you mentioned, I have a marketing background, so went back and re-careered back in 2010. Had a sport and rec undergrad and now have a master's in marketing that I completed in 2012 at Monash. And so really immediately was kind of thrust into that world of small business, which I really wasn't that familiar with in the first instance. But one thing that I found that I could really apply in many ways, the marketing knowledge that I had, the marketing strategy, but also in a way that it was meaningful for small business. So, and clearly small business are really interested and feel like they're missing out if they don't have a social media presence. So yeah, it was an interesting time. I think I might have said to you previously, a lecturer once said, there might be a gap in the market, but is there a market in the gap? And so we may have had the same lecturer because I think you were there a couple of years after me. So, but yeah, I spent a long time trying to work that out, whether there was a market in the gap, because clearly small business doesn't have the resource, time or money that the corporate and government business does, and so that's also been part of the journey, trying to create a service-based product that is of value and can be afforded by small business.
Definitely, and it's actually small business that have the greatest opportunity when it comes to digital, because now you're taking the landscape away from radio, print, television, big budgets needed for entry level into that, to now Facebook, where you can run an ad at $5 a day and get some results.
It's a shame the listeners can't feel the thud going through. That's the Westgate Tunnel project.
Can
you feel it?
Yeah.
So we need sense around.
It's all right. I think if we just put the microphone a little bit closer.
That's right.
I'll keep all this in, by the way.
Sure.
But yeah, that'll actually reduce the
take away the thudding. We're here on the Maribyrnong River, and that's right in the heart of where the Westgate Tunnel project's happening. I think getting back to your question, which I can't recall what it was.
It was what's the greatest the advantage of social for small to medium businesses is now the barrier to entry is a lot lower, because you used to have to do print, radio, television. Big budgets are needed for this.
Yeah, and that's true. And look, I think the starting point, and look, if you take it beyond that, I mean, realistically, the website, really online and internet, what are we, 25 years probably. So, from a small business perspective, probably 25 years ago, if you're not picking up on websites and that sort of stuff, then whether you're still in business nowadays, I don't know. If you've got the ideal business, you probably haven't, right? I think social media, 2008, I'd say, I always pin it back to as sort of when it really started to get some cut and thrust. As far as any of the social media sites, and I think of the 6 main social media, just to avoid confusion for the small business owners. You've got LinkedIn, you can create LinkedIn company. You've got Facebook owns Instagram. You've got Twitter, and then you've got Google, and Google owns YouTube. So those 6 main channels are really assets, and those assets can leverage off the website. So they're really key before you start talking about advertising and all the rest of it, which is interesting because often businesses they go straight to advertising, and they could do that on Google or they'd be doing it on Facebook. But the reality is, if they haven't set the asset up correctly in the first place and they don't have a strategy behind it, they're likely just to be pouring money down the drain. So they're the people you hear saying, I boosted a post, but I don't think it really works for my business. All right.
Yeah, let's talk about that actually. I boosted a post. See, Facebook makes it, because, they've got attention now, right? So they can very affordably and very rightly so charge for that attention. But what they do is you put out a post and then you'll get a notification as a business owner saying, oh, you can reach 2,500 people if you boost this for $20. But I mean, boosting is a nice sort of cheap way and easy way to target, but sometimes not the most effective way. Do you have an opinion on?
I do have an opinion, a very strong opinion around that. Yeah. So, look, I think the first thing is the days of organic reach and the way Facebook's algorithm is still in Australia. We're fortunate that we, in the main, a post will reach probably 10% of the fan base that you already have. So if you get 100 followers, then probably 10 people will see your post, right, from an organic perspective. If you've got 10,000, 100,000, it's back down to 10%. In fact, in the States, I believe it's down to 1 to 2%. So it's a lot smaller. So
well, I'm seeing it with this podcast, for example. So, I mean, on a small scale, I've probably got about 172 on the Facebook, 658 on Instagram, 2,000 on TikTok, which is a little bit better, and then about 2,000 connections on LinkedIn or so. Yeah. But the Facebook, when I just put up an organic Facebook post, out of that 175 people, 35 people see it.
Yeah, that's right. 35. So 35 is actually pretty reasonable. And again, because there's really only two reasons to do marketing communications, right? We're either educating our target audience, what we do, how we do things. In your case, you're educating in two ways. You're educating with the person that you're speaking to, and you're educating in terms of what you can provide as far as the podcasting service goes. But to your point, the beauty of Facebook ads and Instagram, and even that has depreciated over time. So what you used to get for $1, you don't quite get, but it's still extraordinary value, right? So to your point, you asked me around boosting post and what do I think? Do I have an opinion? Well, the most important thing to do if you're going to boost a post, generally that'll be for 30 days, is to make sure you've already set up your saved audiences. So there's no point boosting a post. And I think TikTok is very similar, say, to a Twitter, right? So you're going to get a lot more organic reach on TikTok. Similarly on Twitter, it's amazing how much organic reach you get on Twitter because it all goes through the keeper, right? So it's all about the news feeds, and on Twitter, pretty much all your tweets will appear in the news feed, right? They don't have the same sort of algorithm, right? So if you actually go and turn the analytics on Twitter, you can sort of go, oh, look at my analytics. This is fantastic. The reality is who they are. Are they likely to be people that are interested in what it is that you're talking about and the service that you're providing? But back to the point, you've put money on any post, whether you're boosting it or using Facebook Ads Manager. The most important thing is to make sure that you know where you're boosting it or promoting it to from an ad spend. So you set your saved audiences. You don't just go with what Facebook says, right? So Facebook will push it out. But if you're not sort of trying to target people in Darwin or maybe offshore, then really no point boosting and promoting out to that area, right? So you want to make sure that you target into your geographic, target into your interest groups, and make sure that even if you're only spending $30, well, most of my clients, we encourage a $5 a day spend on the basis that less than 15% of businesses do that, right? So census tells us that. So if you do that, you will then realistically be able to assess whether or not boosting and Facebook advertising is working for your business. Facebook has a pixel that you can put back on your website that redirects, retargets, but it also tells whether all sorts of marketing is working. How many people are visiting the website? It's our version of analytics, effectively. Where are they going to? What are they doing? And how many people are going there? And often, and it's very rare, I would say, that it's social media marketing and Facebook advertising's fault if you're not growing the business. It's often something else.
Yeah, good marketing will just take a bad business out of business a lot quicker. But also, to your point, the power of Facebook and the advertising that we have, a little bit with Google AdWords as well, is the ability to specifically target a person. If I want to target a 40-year-old mother who loves dogs and pets and animals and is in an income bracket of $60,000 to $70,000, I can do that. That's incredibly powerful as a tool. But to your point, I think it should just be used as one of many things that we use as part of marketing communications. Being what I like to call channel agnostic.
Channel agnostic. Explain that further, Tim.
Yeah, we'll do. So channel agnostic, essentially, so someone who's agnostic is basically not obsessed with a particular thing. They'll look at every single option and then evaluate the effectiveness for a particular company. So somebody that's targeting, say, 60 to 70-year-old people running a Instagram campaign possibly not where you want to be, but maybe a Facebook with a Google, and then even cinema ads you could look at would be a part of your, channel agnostic.
Yeah,
thing.
I'm going to say that my version of that is I would have keep the faith when it comes to Facebook and Instagram.
Yeah.
They're one and the same effectively, and you can target. We've got 17 million people on Facebook, 6 million on Instagram, and they're all checking their feed, right? So there's my mum and dad, they're checking to see what I'm up to, all that sort of stuff. So if I'm advertising retirement villages, they don't know why the heck that's appearing in their feed in amongst their grandson, that sort of stuff.
Yeah,
right?
that's actually really
so I would say from a Facebook, it's a very powerful advertising medium. It's just not used well, and people don't necessarily understand it. And as I said, it gets down to that element of, and I think similarly, you mentioned Google ads, and we set up the Google My Business in the first instance, and even that in itself is now a powerful mechanism. If you're a dry cleaner in...
You haven't told me to set it
that's
up.
That's right. Well, look, if you're a dry cleaner or a podcast or whatever it is, but you're location-based, well, then people are going to put that in, and you're pretty much Google gives you the advantages. And the amount of people that haven't, or amount of businesses that Google, the little Google vehicle's gone past and seen that it's a business, and you actually need to claim those businesses, right? So that in itself is a great thing. But yeah, I would suggest that there is areas where you should put more effort in, and areas where you perhaps can put less effort in. And that would maybe be the point. I just think the way I tend to explain to people, particularly business owners, is that they are an asset. Own that asset, because if you don't own it, someone else might butcher it and make a pseudo version. It's part of your IP. If you're bean talking, make sure you got bean talking on all the social media, whether you're using them in full. It may have you would have seen already, I think when we did it, LinkedIn company, for instance. If you create that company, then all of a sudden it does have a search benefit as well, right? Who's the bean talking guy, right? Whilst we don't do social for search sake, it does have some advantages in terms of particularly around naming.
Definitely. And I think it's interesting because there are a couple bean talking, like it's cafes and things around. I did a bit of research. So like bean, like you come and you drink beans and you talk at a cafe. So they've called their cafe bean talking. I won't talk about them anymore because now people will look at them and my search results. No, don't go look at that cafe.
I'm pretty sure you can get the IP though, because effectively, when it's in a different industry and it's non-related, so you'd still be fine.
Yeah.
Make sure you register all that stuff.
Register it all as well. And same to you startup businesses out there. Actually, that point, Google My Business, is very fascinating because we are living in a, basic marketing research or basic marketing consumer behavior always starts at some sort of research point. Doesn't matter if it's a fast-moving consumer good like a candy bar, you still have a bit of it's just a shorter period, or anywhere up as big as buying a boat or a home. Everybody has research systems. Now, how much are you seeing a shift, I guess, from search on Google to then also search on Facebook as well in that research?
Yeah, that's probably not a question that I would normally answer. Realistically, I think where social has endeavored to grab that search is through the hashtagging, and that side of things. So clearly you want to be sort of hashtagging for what it is that you're unique and what your service is, the best at, or at least the best at in your particular area. I think, and so it's important, in terms of, and the same could be said around having the right keywords when you're posting and the right, on the setup of the pages as well. Now, I mean, realistically, each of those social media are websites, right? They just happen to be templated websites.
Well,
so it's just important to have that consistency.
Yeah, I guess I'm using my social media in lieu of a website at the moment.
Yeah.
I'm getting one built, but
yeah, and I think we've had that conversation, but I think at the moment you're sort of a bit of a unique beast because realistically, you're a podcaster, and so even when you create the website, yes, ultimately as a business, you want to have that content repository, but at the moment your content is housed on a podcast, right? So you're slightly unique. But for businesses that do try and shortcut the system and not have a website with their social, I think there are kind of won't win. ultimately you need a website to win. I think if you're in a competitive scenario, and I think the main reason being is that social media is about feed, right? It's about news feed, and so here today, gone tomorrow. 24-hour, 36-hour cycle, all of them. Whether you've got the algorithm or not the algorithm, it's been here, gone there. Website, it's there, and so realistically, you've heard this. So really, search is farming. So I'm a farmer. I put in all my keywords in my website and get my links and all that sort of stuff, so that when people search for me, they'll come to my farm. When I'm a social media marketer, and particularly with Facebook advertising, Instagram, I'm a hunter. I'm going in, I'm putting in my saved audience. If I'm selling real estate, who are the people I'm wanting to buy my real estate? Whereabouts do they live? How old are they? That sort of thing. Realistically, we're hunting the target audience to put our information in their feed. So it's an easy way to think of it in terms of search, farm, social, hunt. But realistically, when I say social, that's probably just the ads.
Yeah.
The marketing messages is really about just touching and retouching and educating and entertaining, if you can, those people that already know of you.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, the argument with, organic reach has gone down, so does that mean I shouldn't bother posting? Does that mean paying an agency like yourself to come up with a content strategy? Is that even a waste of my time? Now, my answer to that, you might just mirror it, is you need to be posting content, because if you run ads as part of research, people will then go back onto your page. And if you've got a catalog of stuff, people will then binge it. And I've seen that. That's my answer to it. But do you have a more?
No, I think that I do reflect that. So I would hope that maybe you might have caught that when I spoke to you. Realistically, it's a mistake. And you see bigger companies do this, and even property developers. We're sitting here in Footscray. There's plenty of property developments going up, and they're advertising only, and there's no marketing message, right? I've seen it with I won't out them, but certain companies, if you just sell and then you go to the socials and there's no other content, there's no trust in that. Social is about trust and relationship. So if you just want to sell me on social, well, I don't want to know about you, right? Ultimately. And so that does come back to that point as well around even the website. Ultimately, if you've only got social pages and you're ultimately only advertising particularly through those, then you're basically just using it as a funnel, right? We don't want to be part of a funnel as such, right? We want to deal with people that have real people that are trustworthy, there's visibility, there's credibility, and ultimately, as business owners, that should create profitability, right? But you're 100% correct. The way I explain it is the Monday to Friday posts are around educating people that already know you, and that's marketing communications, right? The advertising is about getting to people that don't know you from Adam, right? So it's about getting to your target audience so they get exposed to your brand and your business, right? And they wouldn't otherwise. And it's a marked difference. You mentioned, you've got 150 followers or thereabouts. That means if you're posting every second day or every day, then there's a good chance, and this is on Facebook, then there's a good chance that every fortnight that all of those followers might at least see one of your posts, right? But we put $1 on it. We get 150 people seeing it that are your target audience for $1, right? So that's the beauty of advertising, right? Facebook don't care whether you're a 10,000 business, 100,000 business, or 150 fan business. As soon as you spend $1, they treat you the same. They want you to spend 150 a day. So in other words, when you go in there, it'll put a default in there that's a ridiculous corporate default, right? But you don't have to spend that. You bring it down to 2. You can bring it down to 3, bring it down to $5 a day. Whatever you want to spend, you can apply that to your business and you get the benefit that a corporate would get. And often corporate don't do it because they look at it and go, well, we're not going to spend $150 a day.
That's interesting. You can spend $1 on a day on ads. I mean, that's the excuse that I've been telling myself is I've got all this amazing content. I've done podcasts with Jim Penman, with James Whitaker, with now yourself. And there's some...
This one's not finished yet.
This one's not finished yet. But I've got all that content and I said, okay, I'll advertise it when I've got a budget. But a good friend of mine said that he likes to improve stuff by 1%. So he'll read 5 pages of a book every day, and then that'll accumulate over 10 years. He'll get a pile of books on the floor. But I should be almost taking that philosophy into advertising. Why aren't I spending $1 a day on advertising when I can do that?
You should be. Because realistically at the moment, what you're not doing, I'm always reminded of the guy that came and concreted out the back of my house, right? He said you could do this paving here or you could do that there, but if you just whack concrete in, you're going to get your best bang for your buck, right? So realistically, we have a management strategy in, where people pay from $242 a month, right, for every second day posting, on the basis that, I mean, that's not expensive, right? To pay someone as a marketer to come into your business, you can't even pay a casual for less than what, $20 a day. I think $242 a month works out to about $8 a day, right?
Yeah.
So effectively, we charge at a management price because it's often the mistake, and in some ways, even you're replicating that mistake, right? You're putting a lot of time and effort in the posting, where you're only going to get exposed to 150 fans at best on that platform, right? As against, you spend $5, you probably get straight away, you'd be getting 500 to 1,000 people, right? So that's the mistake often that's made. And as you said, you've got a repository now on your podcasting side of things where you can share some interesting information and really get a far greater reach. I learned it really early on. It was actually one of the, it's an old story, but when I started with Melbourne Tigers, they were promoting a competition to go over and see Paddy Mills, San Antonio. And we were spending, I started this competition, I was doing $10 a day. And then the marketing guy came down from Larry Kesselman's mob upstairs and said, whatever you're spending on Facebook, spend 5 times, because all of our competition applicants are coming through Facebook. So they were doing bus shelters and ringing fans and all that sort of stuff. They said, whatever you're spending, spend 5 times. I think I spent half, but then I basically tried to also build the following. My sense at the time, there was only one Melbourne team. Make sure everybody follows Melbourne in the town. But realistically, early doors, I realized that if you spent a few dollars, you got maximum outcome, right? So, and that's remember, a sporting team's no different to you or I in some ways. Yes, it may get a slightly higher organic, but I also learned through that process on Facebook, for instance, if you were going to post, say, quarter time score, half time score, 3/4 time score, well, your algorithm's going to knock. Right, so straight away, you're going to go from maybe 10, maybe 20%, 30% seeing your post if you're doing once a day in a sporting team, down to 15%, down to 5%, down to 2%, down to nobody seeing you. Right?
Are we talking over posting?
We're talking over posting organically, right? And so it knocks. So if you got 20,000, all of a sudden your reach gets knocked. So for instance, in your feed, if you follow news.com.au, right? So they're posting all the time, right? Have you seen the engagement on those posts? There's next to nothing.
It's next to nothing.
It's next to nothing because they're probably getting very little reach on individual posts, right? And so to the point where people, because they're overposted, they turn it off, right? Because they don't want that all in their feed, right? So, but yeah, so Facebook knows that. They don't want you to overpost, right? They want you to advertise. So the reason they give you a lot more for spending $1 is because it stops cluttering their feed.
I reckon every business owner can spend $5 a week.
Yeah,
easily.
You might have to check my parameters around, as you said. So
yeah,
I have a feeling, there is a minimal spend. So even with Google Ads, same thing, right? So I do a minimal spend on Google Ads because I kind of want to know that there's the, and achieve the advantages around that. But yeah, you don't have to set the parameters that they initially set for you, right? I think there is a minimum spend, and I think you'd also have to weigh up, because ultimately I'd reverse your thinking, right? So I've got many businesses that if I'm spending $5 a day and then I go and spend $10 a day and I get twice as much traffic and twice as much business, I'm going to spend $20 a day. So, certain businesses, the ad spend is about what many people like. It is a silver bullet, right? So there's certain businesses, you spend more money, you get far more reach, you get far more exposure, you get far more traffic to website if that's what your campaign's looking to do. If you got good call to action on websites, that sort of thing, then realistically you're going to grow the business. So it doesn't make sense to spend less when you're making more. It's a what do they say about speculate to accumulate in terms of even the stock, that sort of thing. Ultimately, if it's working, do more of it. So yeah. So, it's the same with any of the marketing. When I go and sit in and we do an audit and a consult for people, we want to know what's working or what's been working, right? Because if that's been working, great, let's keep doing that. Maybe do some more of that, right? But let's look at what the gaps might be so that we need to, and often that gap might be advertising, but, what can we do more of that's likely to have a better result for you and your business?
That was interesting. The thing you're talking about, the Richmond Tigers,
Melbourne Tigers, now United.
Melbourne Tigers, sorry.
And that's basketball. Yeah.
Melbourne Tigers, NBL basketball here in Australia. So you're talking about the Melbourne Tigers, that campaign. Someone runs in from head office and says, double your ad spend. But what I've heard is scaling ads, there's quite a science to it. You don't just want to go from spending $5 a day, $10 a day to then dumping $100 a day in, because it's not as effective. Well, that's what I've heard. But is there a process to actually scaling up?
Well, there's all sorts of things. I mean, it's pretty sophisticated, it's fair to say, nowadays. So straight away, this was 5 years ago. So I mean, as I said, they were getting probably a lot more bang for buck, right? But there's a lot of basic measurements, right? So for most general small businesses, $1 for an action can be par, right? So if you're trying to get click through and $1's cost you click through, you're trying to get engagement, you get an engagement, it's costing $1, but then you're getting all that reach and exposure. Australians don't apply, we might see something and so we'll watch it. So for video views, for instance, if you're promoting a short video, you're actually, the campaign is for video views. So and things like that, for 1 cent might be for a 3-second view. So it depends on the campaign to a degree, but you can do A and B tests initially. But realistically, there's a lot of hearsay and I heard, and who tells people that? Like, realistically, I don't know many small businesses that are getting the sort of education necessarily to know what, do they actually have objectives? And particularly when it's coming in from, you mentioned an agency type perspective, it's often confusing because, well, is it content creation? Is what you do social media marketing, or is what I do social media marketing? Is it SEO? Is it Google Ads? Is it Facebook? Is it LinkedIn? So as I said, we try and make sure that they understand what social media marketing for us. We keep it simple. It's 6 channels. And if you're going to advertise, we advertise through Facebook and through Instagram. Ultimately, it's a bit like, when's the best time to post? I heard I should be posting at 11 p.m., right? Because that's when all my, my late night hours are going to be. I'm like, the things we read come from corporate. So the likes of Facebook and Hootsuite and Google ultimately want to work with Nike and Coke and the big brands, right? And that's who they want to spend their money with, right? So the education is not down at our level. It's a no-brainer when to post. You post at the start of the day, you post at the middle of the day, or you post at the end of the day, right? And even if you do post at a time that may be slightly unusual, and so when we use Hootsuite, for instance, that's our scheduling platform, we'll do an auto schedule and they'll choose which time to post, right? So the reason I say post at the start of the day, post in the middle of the day, or post at the end of the day, because that's when they post. They won't ever post after, I think, about 7 p.m., generally speaking, right? And yet I have businesses that tell me, I want to post at 7:30 because that's when, my target audience is on. It's a news cycle anyway. You would have seen on LinkedIn, I sometimes see people's post 3 or 4 days after they've posted, right? So it doesn't really matter too much, right? Yes, there's research to say the no-brainer is start of the day, middle of the day, end of the day. But if you don't do it at that time, you can test it, you can suss it out. Organically, you're probably talking 1 or 2 people anyway, right? So it's not something to get fixated. It shouldn't be a barrier to entry. It's basically something to realize that if you post, people were more likely to see it. If you don't post, they won't see it. If you advertise, new people are more likely to see it. If you don't advertise it, new people are less likely to see it. Simple as that.
Wow. I think the thing there is any time is a good time to post. You know, yes, you've got morning, middle, afternoon, end of the day, quite obvious, but people are going to see it 2 days later, 1 day later, like LinkedIn, often. So I used to, as early as 2 weeks ago, I used to be like, oh, I didn't wake up at 7 a.m. And I'm really ashamed of myself because that's a really good time to post for LinkedIn, you know. But then a friend of mine just said, all right, you've missed that time, you've missed it, just post it anyway.
Yeah, exactly. So there's no, and look, that's another interesting barrier often for people is they'll say, but we're a professional service and I think our clients are all on LinkedIn. Well, that's all very well, but only 4 million, you hear different numbers, but let's say 4 to 6 million on LinkedIn. And how often do you reckon they're checking their newsfeed? Other than people like you and me, right? We're on a lot because effectively we're on there because we're wanting to engage. And when I say we're on there a lot, I'm on there a lot. I'm engaging often as Steve, but I'm posting through DIFY Social, right? So it's all about business. It's all about business growth and develop for me. It's not about, the running gag of people talking to camera while they're driving, right? So driver's license doesn't make you more impressive to me, right? To be able to talk to video. Hence why a professional setup like what you're doing is far more impressive, I think, and it gives a lot more credibility, right? So I think there is often confusion, firstly, around the fact that, yes, your target audience may well be on LinkedIn, but CEOs, CFOs, CMOs are also on Facebook. They're also using WordPress. They're also using Xero software potentially. So there's always, you can target your people where they actually are and where they're more likely to be checking the newsfeed. That's the first thing. The second thing is personal brand is not business brand, right? So personal brand, and it's a fine line. You know, we've had the conversation, been talking ultimately may not be Tim. You know, there's an opportunity here. And look, you may finish up going down the Jim's line. It's not to say that someone like Jim hasn't been successful, right, in having the beard and that sort of stuff.
Parallel universe.
But realistically, for most people, that's not the case. So when you're out there day in, day out, and it's it's just that person, or it starts to look it's just all about self-promotion. If you know what I mean, when it's all about self, it misses the point. It's not about Tim. It's about what Been Talking can do with the people that they're talking with, right? And often in your case, it's a beautiful example. In fact, you're able to go, okay, well, this is a podcast. This is with Steve. It's not really about me. I'm introducing Steve. And it's not really about Steve because I want the listener to get some advantage from our conversation. And so it's kind of about you. And so whoever you are, listener, and it's great to have you listening. So ultimately, you want to be, whether it's in the way we speak and the way we look and write on any of the online media, we need to make sure it's all about the end user, right? It's about them. Right, it's about target community, and even target community is kind of a marketing way of saying it's about your community, right? It's about the people that could get some advantage by using your business service. If it's a service business, if it's a product, then how can they become more beautiful, lose weight, become healthier, whatever the case is? It's all about them, right? And so I think often on LinkedIn where you've got personal brand, that sometimes misses the point.
Definitely, because that grey area just becomes a little bit less grey and a little bit more dark.
Yeah, well, look, in 10 to 20 years' time, I hope to exit my business. And so if it's all about Steve Hubbard, that business is going to be pretty hard to exit.
Yeah, because someone wants to buy an asset that they can jump into. Hopefully their marketing person, and then they look at this and go, wow, okay, that's a business model that I can jump in on.
And it's the biggest challenge. Scale is the biggest challenge for many small business.
One of the best things a mentor told me, Ian McRae is his name, so hi Macca if you're watching, but he said, always listening and watching, he said every business should start with an exit in mind. It might be 10, 20 years I want to sell the business. It might be, no, I want to turn this into something, a legacy, something bigger than me. But every business needs to have an exit in mind, and that's what I think you've just touched on.
Yeah. Oh, look, and what I'm reminded, Kerry Bolton is a local exit strategist in Port Melbourne, and she uses the socials quite well in terms of her business. But the first thing she said is just about being more professional to start with. You know, the entry is, yes, you want to have in mind how are you going to exit. She also says that I think all baby boomers will be gone by 2027. So there's going to be a lot of businesses that are either going to just shut shop or be available for purchase in one way or another. But the bottom line is, do you want to be a professional business? You don't have to. It's interesting in the world, particularly in the world of small business. Realistically, owning a small business doesn't immediately make you professional. So
the barrier to entry to own a business is quite low. It's $36 to register.
Right. And so I think, in fact, there is all stats around, small business numbers, 2 million of us in Australia. But one of the key things that it talks about, in actual fact, when people say X amount of businesses fail, the reality is X amount of businesses never started, right? So they were hobbies or they were ideas that actually never hit the ground realistically. They registered an ABN maybe, but then they didn't really execute. And so, yeah, look, anyway, we've gone further down a path than I was expecting, but the reality is, it's about having business growth and development in mind, and that starts with being a professional business. And as you said, ultimately that has in mind how you might finish.
Now, I want to give people a deeper understanding into what you do and everything. Now, this is a question that's a bit like picking between your favourite child, but do you have a really favourite case study where you took someone from social media recluse to now you're getting some real cool results and you makes you smile when you think of it?
Yeah, well, from a case study point of view, please go and visit the blog. So I've written up pretty much every business we've ever worked with. So if you go to the DIFY Social blog, you'll see those. Certainly, my favorite are the ones that have been with me for the longest, right? So, and they're great clients, because they just know that it's good for their business. So for a long time, I haven't got my glasses. I usually pick them up when but the Australasian College of Behavioural Optometrists, they are one of my longest standing businesses, and they're an association of professional optometrists. And we've been sharing their messages for probably 5 or 6 years now, and they're one where we do a sort of a message that educates the consumer, so with the child or themselves that need to perhaps go and see a behavioural optometrist, and then in the afternoon the post is telling the professional what education is coming up, what things are available to purchase, and then we typically advertise and promote they have a NACBO, so a national conference every year. So that's really the only paid advertising we typically do. And look, they started out at a zero baseline, right? So in terms of all their socials, now they've got 16,000 followers, and that built pretty early, and that's kind of was a good learning exercise, because in Asia they do use social media a lot different to us. And so in actual fact, when we promote now, we need to split test. So we keep Australia and New Zealand, and then we split test into Asia, because they'll go, the Asian communities will go 10-1 in terms of their engagement. So yeah, look, they're one. I mean, others, people like Mortgage Choice in Williamstown, Jonathan, realistically, we've worked with them for 5 or 6 years. It's great to work with franchise brands. And it's interesting often with franchisors is because they kind of support the people that want to support themselves. And certainly we want to make sure that any franchise partners that we're working with are the best of that particular brand. you know, a lot of the fun ones where there's crossover in terms of, I have a sport and recreation background, so clearly if there's opportunities to work with health and wellbeing type business, you know, we've got, you know, we enjoy working with those particularly. I've told you at the start of the conversation, we're big in Wyndham now. We've got Caitlin working out there with BNI and you know, fantastic BNI out there, and so we're really working with some fantastic new customers. But you know, it's one of the most enjoyable part of my journey. You know, I went and studied marketing thinking I would work with the AFL or something along those lines.
Me too. For me, it was cricket, or I wanted to go with CommBank because CommBank sponsored the cricket.
Yeah, that's right. Well, that's an interesting... That's another conversation probably, because we don't like banks in our social media, but they have to go through other ways to get in front of us. So look, realistically, Caitlin's doing a fantastic job out in Wyndham, and my point there was that we have a leaky bucket. You know, at the end of the day, businesses come and go, as I said before, in terms of how they actually survive. One of the main sort of, and we're always improving. You know, I'm not the same business I was 5 or 6 years ago. So clearly, people often say, well, how do you keep up with it? Well, the reality is the social medias just typically get better. And so we just take advantage of how better they are, right? So that's the first thing. Yes, we might lose some on the algorithms, but realistically, in the main, they're getting better and better. But yeah, so we have people come and go. One of the things we do really encourage, if we work with clients now, we actually hold them as a maintenance client, just so it, you know, we don't go from posting every second day and advertising or every day, and then all of a sudden there's no post going up and people just think they've gone out of business. So we kind of learnt fairly early on that if we didn't offer at least a maintenance, we were doing something once a week. Then
and that's the conversation we've had. I stopped doing this podcast because of illness, and that where have you gone kind of thing is real. So very interesting.
Yep.
I think that's a really cool spot to leave it on.
Fantastic.
But I got 2 more questions that I ask everybody at the end of the show. One, what is coming up for you in the next 6 to 12 months for your business that you're really pushing on, really excited about, that's coming up there?
Yeah, well, you mentioned it at the start of the show. So I'm going through this whole sort of systemization process with the franchising. And so really at the moment...
Where DIFY is...
So DIFY, that's right. So Caitlin to some degree is piloting that. I've got a couple of other graduates that help me out in the business. But really I'm excited about... a little bit like studying, when you get to that point where you really feel like all the systems are in there. I've got all my things lined up around legals and that sort of thing, so that I am in a strong position to be able to recruit marketers into the business. And so that certainly is an exciting thing for me. So I think that's big enough, believe me, when you're moving from being effectively running your own consultancy to trying to scale that and bring that into sort of numerous markets. One of the things they talk about, mind you, and I'm very mindful, they talk about the Olympic ring. So the reason we're in Melbourne West after being in Melbourne inner Western City is because you kind of look at it like the Olympic rings. You don't want to, I don't want my next marketer to be over in Perth, even though I've got family there. Realistically, you want to be in a position to be able to support them. So my first way of thinking is, how do I get that marketer 30 clients so that they've got a really good, strong, ongoing business? And, if they're winning, clients are winning, they're winning, I'm winning. It's a real adage for me. It's win-win-win. If we can all be win-win-win, that's exciting. And
fantastic. And if anybody has heard anything through this show and are compelled now to reach out to yourself and have a chat or check out DIFY Social, how do people find you?
Yeah, well, I think the best bet would be to go to the website, DIFY Social, DIFY. That stands for Do It For You, difysocial.com.au. You'll find all our information. The step-in point usually is around an audit consult, but we're always happy to have what in BNI we call one-to-ones and have a phone chat with any conversation. But yeah, you'll find that we use all the socials. You can book appointments through Facebook page, and certainly you can approach me personally if they wish to on the social channels too. So I certainly use all the ones that we use for our clients.
Do as we say. Awesome, Steve. Well, I've been Tim, you've been Steve, and we've been talking. Thank you for coming on.
I like it.